I had something happen in the news recently. It was last week, I think, or so. Former CEO Eric Schmidt of Google made a comment about remote work. You may have seen this. He was basically saying, "Hey, because of this work from home policy at Google, OpenAI and the other guys are kicking their butt in AI." And so, I mean, there's a lot this from a leadership perspective. Throwing excuses at your people because, oh man, this is what struck me. So you may not know. I think I mentioned it earlier. Maybe I don't. I've run a virtual company since day one. So we're 20 years this year actually, and we have run virtually the entire time. Now we've had some folks that are local, some that were, but ultimately we've been at the basis of who we are, a geographically distributed company, and not distributed to offices but to homes, and so. I get it. I get the remote work thing, and I know there's challenges, so I don't want to dismiss that. I mean, we could go on and on and on a podcast of how to effectively, the challenges around remote work, how to effectively get teams together and all that. And we're still, I mean, that's a constantly shifting puzzle that we're always working on. Of course, COVID changed a lot of that with the technology and everything that it brought in. Let me pause. COVID, horrible, right? Bad. COVID, bad, But one of the things that COVID did in that process, it normalized remote work to a certain degree. And the tools improved so much better. Whether you get on a Zoom or a Meet or a Teams or you name it, it just got so much better because so many more people were on. So lots more testers, lots more people demanding it to be better, and it got better. My point is, I kind of understand remote work a little bit. And we've been running a company now for a couple decades. And I think in many ways you measure us, it's been successful and we've had a good time. We're doing some good things and okay. So, but I'm not the CEO of Google. So I don't know what the hell I'm talking about in that regard. Pardon my French. So, but I will say what I want to dig into is the notion of it's the employee's fault while we're not successful as a company. And I don't know if you read, like either from like Jocko Willink or anybody else, and Extreme Ownership, it's a great read if you're into that kind of thing. But the whole premise of saying we are losing to our competitor because our employees are allowed to be fully people is a heck of a thing to say. And again, I'm sure he would not have articulated it that way. And this isn't about him. I think I just want to reference, if you're a leader in an organization, I think it's so easy, and it happens to all of us, where I think it's so easy to separate the worker and the human. And when we look at it that way, we begin to think worker. Now, I'm from West Virginia, and we've got a long labor history of not so necessarily pretty labor. We got awesome laborers, we've got hard workers, but we've also had a lot of exploitation over the years. And so I kind of come with maybe a little bias here that, there's an act called cribbing, right? So you bring so much coal in to the company, and the company, they measure it, but they might measure it a little light, and you don't get paid as much, and you can't say anything, or they just won't even take your coal the next day. From a working perspective, the mine wars of early West Virginia. So like this stuff's a little bit in my blood, my bones. So I get it, but I'm also a CEO. I'm also a guy who grew up in West Virginia, and I know what worker suffrage is like. And I know what, just historically, and in my own family, my great grandfather would literally on his hands and knees as a kid crawl into the mine shaft with another kid in front of him and another kid behind him, and one kid digging up there with a pickaxe, and they would shove the coal between the legs. The other one would get it, shove the coal between their legs. And that's how they made some money back when they were kids. So the moment you begin to separate workers and humans is the moment I think you make a huge mistake fundamentally as a business leader, as an organizational leader, as a dad, when you separate a human from the kid, all these things. And we all do it, and I get it. But this was such a stark reality where dude's up in his management, ownership role and all this kind of stuff. And like, why aren't we succeeding? Could it be our strategy? Could it be maybe our organizational model? Could it be leadership? Could it be people? Sure, it's all that. But like, just to say, oh, these people are going to be people now, and that's making us behind because the other guys aren't people. When, by the way, the other competition has almost the exact same work policy. It's crazy, but that's where it'll lead you. And I think that it's obviously lots of steps off the path, but that first step that says a worker is a worker. I don't care what's going on in your personal life or whatever. A worker's a worker, and you're not a human to me. You're a worker, and that just changes everything. And I think that's harsh. I get it for anybody. But I also think there's a line there that I think fundamentally we sometimes cross in our minds Yeah, they got stuff going on at home, but they're here. They need to work. Now, that's true. That is true. You show up for work, buddy, bring your pickaxe, bring your shovel, bring your keyboard, bring your laptop, whatever it is, bring it and do your job. But you're still the human there doing your job. You've put the hard hat on, you've put the suit on, you've put the whatever it is you're wearing and whatever it is you're using, metaphorically, you are a worker, but you're still the human. You're still the human. You didn't leave the human at the door. Now, we all know sometimes you got to leave things at the door. But that's I don't know how to articulate this best, but that's on the individual to do that, and the adult, the responsible person to do that. And if someone is having trouble there, you have conversations and all that. But to the idea of a blanket statement to say, because we let people live their lives and because we're trying to grow and shape and evolve with the world we're in, which remote work is, because we're trying to evolve there and we're trying to treat people like humans, we're losing. I don't know, again, I don't know this guy. I mean, I don't know him personally, but, and it's not about him. It's about that kind of sentiment that I see in business everywhere. And we could all fall prey to it. So let's not just sit and point fingers and be criticizers. It's not what I'm doing. We can all fall prey to that. It's so easy to be like, well, those schmoes didn't do their thing. Well, it could be Mr. Schmo's problem today for sure. But what have you done organizationally? What kind of environment have you set up for Schmo to be successful, or to exit Schmo because he's not going to work out or she's not going to work out at your organization? What kind of culture have you set up in order for those employees to flourish in a remote way or in a flexible way? We've had a flexible work schedule, a remote work schedule, and we made lots of mistakes. And there's been lots of times we've made bad hires and they shouldn't have worked in a remote environment. Here they are on their underwear playing PlayStation all day long. You have that, of course. I guess I'm kind of picking at that fundamental notion of leaders and employees, and leaders looking to the employees and saying they're just not working hard enough. They're just not smart enough. They're not good enough. They're not dedicated enough. They're not whatever enough, right? And you know what? There are some individuals who absolutely are duds. They don't want to work. They don't want to, and they've got their reasons. And maybe that's trauma, maybe it's whatever. And so to sit and judge them, okay, that's what value is that? If they can function and flourish in your organization, and that's your priority, then let's go. And if they can't, then let's go. See ya. Let's leave. Go somewhere else and let's be kind about it. And let's get you somewhere where you can flourish. And that's always. And I talked about this in earlier. That's always my goal at Mountain Leverage, is for you as an employee. If you're an employee at Mountain Leverage, to flourish. And that's it. And so if we're failing, if we're failing as an organization, now there's another side of this, and this is where I talk out both sides of my mouth. It's also when organizations fail, they're like, oh, that executive should be fired. That's not always the case either. Sometimes stuff happens, guys, and so this idea of it's got to all be these terrible employees, or it's got to all be this clueless CEO. It may be. There are plenty of clueless CEOs for sure, but I guess it's just there's a whole like everything, it's a little more complicated than what it seems on the surface. But for show, we've got to exit this person, or if we're trying to save our job from being X, we might say it's all these knuckleheads down here, these donkeys that can't run a race. Okay, and you hear me reference the whole donkeys. That's an old saying, and it gets attributed to 15 different people. Where basically you can't win the Kentucky Derby without thoroughbreds, or you can't win them with donkeys or whatever else, right? That could be taken so many ways. But the way we've taken it, and we've used that here at Mountain Leverage, the way I've taken it here is they're just different. I mean, I don't want to take a thoroughbred down in the Grand Canyon packing in for a few days. I don't want to do that. I want a donkey. I want a mule. I want to wait. And so it's about the appropriate individual, or the appropriate, in this case, animal to do what needs to be done. And so I guess my point is, if you are in an organization and you're struggling with something, and your first notion is, oh, these terrible employees, there's something wrong in the organization. Yeah, you may have terrible employees. I don't know. Maybe your hiring practices aren't fantastic. Maybe your culture stinks. And so maybe you're bringing in decent employees. Maybe you're attracting the wrong employees. And then maybe you stink. Maybe you need improvement. I don't know. Maybe you're just, you aren't trying hard enough, or maybe you aren't you aren't trained well enough, or whatever. I don't know. It's lots of things. But to just this whole quick assumption, you see it in education, like the teachers are bad. You see it in this area. come on, man. At some point, I try to pause and think, okay, yeah, it could be stinky employees. They could be just stinky. I get it. But it's probably more than that. And I think, don't you think Google's probably collected some good employees over the years? Yeah. Don't you think even if they're able to work from home, don't you think most of them probably still have a ton of drive and just want to rock and roll? I mean, I can tell you, a Mountain Leverage employee, for the most part, and we've hired duds and we've hired people that may not measure up, but generally, I don't have to go out and thrash them with a stick to get them to move. They're motivated. That's who they are. We hire those people. We build a culture that encourages that helps encourage flourishment for those individuals. So an individual that's driven, self-motivated, wants to do things, they're attracted to here. And then we formulate that, we cultivate that, and we elevate that, we encourage that. And so, if that's what you want, build an organization that what's that, or a team, or you know what, if you don't have that kind of locus of control in your operation, find an organization that does match your values, your ideals, and then begin building your nest there and attract the right birds, if you will. And I guess that's just what I'm saying. And I don't mean any slight on Mr. He may have had a weak moment, but I will tell you, I've been in meetings, I've been in the after lounges of a conference or whatever else, and I've heard executives, I've heard leaders, I've heard managers, I've heard employees, I've been on both sides of that, I've heard talk about like the other side, like they're a bunch of idiots, and they're the problem. When oftentimes it's almost always it's more nuanced than that, and there are duds all over the place. We get it. I completely understand that, but I guess the point is I've been in those conversations and I know how quick it is to just grab that easy one off the shelf and say, well, we're not winning, we're not beating our competitor, or we're not profiting, or we're not doing this because our people just aren't working hard enough, or we just have the wrong folks, or they're working from home. I don't know. And I get it. Obviously, there's certain jobs you can't work from home. You can't be a bus driver from home. Well, I mean, at some point, maybe when there's self-driving buses, or maybe you're doing it with a joystick, whatever. The reality is there's some work just can't be done from home, and some work is better. There's some collaborative work, but I can tell you, we do a ton of collaborative work for people I haven't seen in a year in person. And so I guess I'm just struggling, and I don't know what I'm picking at ultimately, other than this. If you're a leader, or let's take this to family, if you're a father, a mother, I don't know, and your kid's just being a knucklehead, all right? Kids can be knuckleheads. So can parents, but kids can be knuckleheads. They're growing. They're not even fully formed. I get all that. And if you look at them only as a kid, they're a kid, and not that they're also a human who has the human condition and suffers from some of the same things you suffer and have the environment that affects them a certain way. And all right, full stop. Flip over to an employee. If you look at an employee and you see him as a worker and you don't recognize the employee, the human side, where they're mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and daughters and sons and all the things, right? If you don't recognize that for both your family or your business or your organization, your community, same kind of thing, I suspect that's going to be, you'll probably be pretty upset with everybody, and that whole thing, if everybody else is an a-hole, you're probably the a-hole. It might be one of those moments. I have found for me, recognizing the whole person is the win. And you know what? That leaves you open to some people coming in and bringing more of their wholeness, okay? and you're like, hey, this is not a therapy session. This is not a social club. We've got work to do. We got customers that are relying on us. We've got each other that we're relying on. You've got to deliver this so I can do this and that. So it's real. You're trying to do something. You're achieving. So there's a balance here. I'm not saying you just come in and everything, but there are going to be seasons. And sometimes that star employee is going to struggle. Or the team is going to struggle, or the entire company is going to struggle. And if it's such an easy switch for you just to flip and say, these stinking employees, they're terrible. I don't know, man. Maybe this trend that happened, the spike of trend, it was almost kind of forced upon us in the world around COVID to go remote work. Maybe it all switches back and everybody's going to be working in place somewhere. I don't think it's happening, but maybe it will. I can assure you, we're not. I mean, we're rocking. We figured it out. And it's working. And a key part of that, a huge key part of that is because I think we recognize the whole person. And maybe that doesn't work for you. Maybe you're in an industry where you don't think that works. But I can tell you, I've been in some of the lowest paid organizations for their employees. So if you would consider, well, that only works with information workers and highly paid workers and whatever else. Okay, again, I've been in some of the lowest paid environments and look at those workers, and I see awesome, dedicated killers. Man, they're out there rocking and rolling on a daily basis, killing it at their work. And what I see is a culture that encourages them to flourish, and that's what I've got. I don't know. Again, no shade to anyone who says anything stupid online, because I'm sure I'll say a bunch of it myself and already have. But this one just stuck with me, man. It just popped in my head, and I was like, "Yep, heard this before. Let's blame the people." Yep, I've heard it. Let's blame them. So let's not. I don't know. I'm not. I'm gonna try not to. I'm gonna try not to blame him. I mean, he's a person too. Maybe he had a bad day. Maybe that's how he's programmed. Maybe that's how he's thinking. It's how he's trained. I don't know. But for me, it's the whole person, and that comes with overhead, and that comes with challenges. But the goodies on the other side of that, I wouldn't trade them. I love them. So anyway, hey, I don't know. I don't know if this kind of stuff's helpful to you. Let me know if this is like garbage and you don't want to hear it, or if you do want to hear more of this stuff, or you got questions. I'm always happy to come back to something or further explain something that may or may not be helpful to you. But when it comes to you, I hope wherever you are, you're flourishing.